The throne room of Emperor Vorath stretched for nearly a kilometer. Pillars of living crystal rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one glowing with the captured light of a conquered star. Thousands of servants moved in perfect silence across the polished floor, their heads bowed, their eyes never daring to look upon the figures seated at the center of it. Emperor Vorath, the Eternal, had ruled the Galactic Dominion for 300 years. His body had been modified, enhanced, and rebuilt so many times that little of his original form remained. He sat upon a throne made of living crystal that responded to his thoughts, shifting and changing shape according to his moods. Today, the crystal formed sharp edges and dark colors. The Emperor was displeased. "Repeat what you said," Vorath commanded, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. Admiral Tessa stood before him, her forearms clasped behind her back in the formal military posture of the Dominion. She was a decorated officer who'd led the conquest of 7 star systems. Yet standing before the Emperor, she felt like a small child facing an angry parent. "The human territories, my Emperor," she said carefully. "We sent 12 scout ships to map their space and assess their military strength. All 12 have returned with the same message." "And what message is that?" Tessa activated the holographic display built into her uniform. A recording began to play. The image showed the bridge of a Dominion scout ship. Through the main window, a small blue and green planet could be seen in the distance. A transmission appeared on the screen, simple text in the Dominion's own language. "Turn back. Terran space is closed. Entry means death." The Emperor stared at the message for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. The sound filled the throne room, bouncing off the crystal pillars, causing the servants to drop to their knees in fear. Vorath laughed until tears streamed from his artificial eyes. "Death," he finally said, still chuckling. "These humans threaten us with death? Do they know who we are?" General Corvus stepped forward. He was the Emperor's chief military advisor, a massive warrior whose body was more machine than flesh. Scars covered what remained of his original skin, each one a memory of a battle won. "My Emperor, the humans control only 47 star systems. Our estimates suggest they have fewer than 500 military vessels. They are nothing compared to the might of the Dominion. And yet they dare to threaten us," Vorath said, his amusement fading into cold anger. "They send warnings to our ships as if they were our equals. This insult cannot stand." "I agree, my Emperor. I recommend we send the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet to subjugate their primary colony worlds. 200 warships should be more than enough to crush any resistance they might offer." Vorath nodded slowly. "Do it, but Corvus, I want prisoners. I want their leaders brought before me in chains. I want them to kneel in this very room and beg for mercy. Then I will show the galaxy what happens to those who threaten the Dominion." General Corvus bowed deeply. "It will be done, my Emperor. The humans will learn their place." Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, Fleet Commander Park Dohan received the news he had been dreading for 20 years. He stood in the command center of Terran Defense Headquarters, a facility built deep beneath a mountain range. Hundreds of officers worked at their stations around him, monitoring the vast network of sensors and satellites that watched the borders of human space. On the main display screen, a map showed the position of the approaching Dominion fleet. 200 ships. They had crossed the boundary marker 3 hours ago. Dohan was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short in military fashion and a face lined with years of worry. He had joined the Terran Defense Force as a young man, back when humanity had first discovered they were not alone in the universe. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment. He picked up his communication device and contacted President Yoon-ji directly. "Madam President," he said when her face appeared on his screen, "they have crossed the line. The Dominion fleet is now inside Terran space. President Yoon was a small woman with kind eyes that hid a core of steel. She had been elected on a platform of peace and cooperation with alien species. But she understood, as every human leader understood, that peace required strength. Did they respond to the final warning? She asked. No, Madam President. They ignored it completely. Yoon closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her expression was firm. Then we have no choice. I am authorizing Protocol Omega. May God forgive us for what we are about to do. Do-hwan ended the call and turned to his officers. Every face in the room was turned toward him, waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, we knew this day would come. We have trained for it. We have prepared for it. Now, it is here. He pressed a button on his console, activating a transmission that would reach every military vessel and installation in human space. This is Fleet Commander Park Do-hwan. Authorization code Omega 773. All units, execute defensive protocols. The Dominion has entered our space with hostile intent. He paused, looking at the display screen showing the approaching enemy fleet. 200 ships, each one carrying weapons capable of destroying cities. The Dominion believed this would be an easy victory. They believed humans were weak, primitive, barely worth the effort of conquering. They were about to learn how wrong they were. One more thing, Do-hwan said into the transmission. Remember why we do this. Remember what we are protecting. Our families, our children, our future. The Dominion has conquered 12,000 star systems. They have enslaved countless species. They believe nothing can stop them. His voice hardened. They believe wrong. Today, we show them what humanity truly is. Today, we teach them why they should have listened to our warning. He ended the transmission and sat down in his command chair. Around him, his officers began executing the protocols. They had practiced for decades. The warning had been ignored. Now came the consequences. Commander Orth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and looked at the human colony world floating in space before him. It was a beautiful planet, he had to admit. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, with green and brown continents scattered across it. Cities glittered on the night side like clusters of jewels. The humans called this world New Bizon. According to Dominion intelligence, it was home to nearly 8 million people. Within a few hours, it would belong to the Empire. Status report, Orth commanded. His tactical officer checked her displays. All 200 ships are in position, Commander. The humans have not responded to our presence. No defensive fleets detected. No weapon platforms. Nothing. Orth frowned. This was too easy. Even the most primitive species usually manage some form of resistance when facing invasion. The humans just sat on their pretty planet, going about their daily lives as if the largest military force they had ever seen was not floating above their heads. Perhaps they are wise enough to surrender without fighting, his second-in-command suggested. Perhaps, Orth said, though he did not believe it. Something felt wrong. Target the largest moon. Fire a warning shot. Show them what our weapons can do. The tactical officer nodded and gave the order. 3 heavy cruisers moved forward and aimed their main cannons at an uninhabited moon that orbited the planet. Blue light gathered at the tips of their weapons, energy building to devastating levels. They fired. 3 beams of pure destruction lanced across space and struck the moon. The surface exploded. Craters formed instantly, sending millions of tons of rock flying into the void. It was a display of power meant to terrify the humans into submission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to shimmer about 1,000 kilometers ahead of the fleet. Where there had been nothing but empty void, a ship appeared. It was small, barely larger than a Dominion shuttle, dark gray in color with no visible weapons. Or stared at it in confusion. One ship? The humans sent one tiny ship against 200 warships? Commander, his communications officer said, the human vessel is transmitting. Put it through. A woman's face appeared on the main screen. She was young, perhaps 30 years by human counting, with short black hair and calm dark eyes. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations. When she spoke, her voice was soft and almost sad. You were warned, she said. My name is Captain Choi Murray of the Terran Defense Force. On behalf of humanity, I am asking you one final time to withdraw from our space. If you do so now, peacefully, no harm will come to you or your crews. Orth felt his anger rising. This human female dared to threaten him. With one tiny ship against his entire fleet? Human, he said, making the words sound like an insult. You are in no position to make demands. Surrender your vessel and your planet, or we will destroy you. Captain Murray nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. I understand. I am truly sorry for what happens next. She ended the transmission. Orth laughed and turned to his tactical officer. Destroy that pathetic little ship? Then begin the planetary bombardment. I want their capital city in ruins within the hour. The tactical officer tried to comply. She pressed the firing controls. Nothing happened. Commander, she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. The weapons are not responding. What? That is impossible. Try again. She tried again. And again. Her displays began flickering. Error messages appeared across every screen on the bridge. Throughout the ship, alarms started to sound. Commander, the engineering officer shouted. Something is inside our systems. Our computers are being attacked from within. Orth felt cold fear grip his heart. He turned to look out the main window at the tiny human ship. It still hung there in space, doing nothing, threatening no one. But across his fleet, chaos was spreading. Reports came flooding in from every ship. Navigation systems were failing. Weapons were going offline. Life support was beginning to malfunction. It was as if some invisible enemy had reached inside every computer and started destroying everything from within. How? Orth demanded. How is this possible? His communications officer was working frantically at her console. Her face had gone pale. Commander, I think I understand. These programs, this attack, it did not start today. Our systems have been infected for years, maybe decades. The humans seeded these programs through our communication networks, hidden inside normal transmissions. They have been waiting inside our computers all this time. Waiting for what? Waiting for us to attack them. On the crushing tide, the reactor core began to overload. Emergency systems engaged automatically, but they too had been compromised. The ship began to shake violently. All hands, abandon ship. Orth commanded. All ships, abandon ship. Across the fleet, escape pods began launching into space. Hundreds, then thousands of them, carrying terrified Dominion soldiers away from their dying vessels. Some ships exploded. Others simply went dark, their power completely drained. A few managed to maintain basic life support, but nothing more. In less than 30 minutes, 70 warships were either destroyed or completely disabled. The rest floated helplessly in space, their crews abandoning them or waiting for rescue. Captain Choi Mai-Ray watched it all from her small ship. Her crew worked silently around her, monitoring the situation, ensuring that the human programs did their work without causing unnecessary deaths. She opened a channel to you, Commander Orth's escape pod. Commander, she said, I am prepared to offer you terms. Surrender yourself and your surviving crews. You will be held briefly, treated well, and then return to Dominion space with a message for your Emperor. Orth, floating helplessly in his escape pod, surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty fleet, had no choice but to accept Dot as human rescue ships began collecting the survivors. Myray looked out at the stars. This was only the beginning. The Emperor would not accept this defeat. He would send more ships. Many more. Dot and humanity would be ready for them. She had joined the Defense Force at 18, trained for 15 years, and spent another 10 waiting for this moment. She had never wanted it to come. She had hoped the Dominion would heed the warnings and leave humanity alone, but they had not listened. They never listened. Captain Mireille closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer for the dead. Then she returned to her work. There was much still to be done. The survivors of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet arrived at the Dominion capital 3 weeks later. They came in human transport ships, fed and healthy, their wounds treated by human doctors. They had been given clean uniforms and enough supplies for the journey home. Commander Orth was not among the healthy. He had not been harmed by the humans, but something inside him had broken during those terrible hours above New Bizen. He barely spoke. He barely ate. He spent most of his time staring at nothing, remembering the moment when his mighty fleet had been reduced to floating wreckage by an enemy he never even saw. Emperor Varath was not interested in Orth's mental state. He was interested in one thing only, making an example of failure. The execution was public. Millions watched as Orth was brought before the throne and forced to his knees. The Emperor did not bother with speeches or explanations. He simply activated the weapon built into his throne and reduced Orth to ash. Then he summoned his war council. The council chamber was smaller than the throne room but no less impressive. 12 of the most powerful military leaders in the Dominion sat around a circular table, made of the same living crystal as the Emperor's throne. Holographic displays floated above the table, showing maps and reports and intelligence data. The humans have sent something with the survivors, General Corvus said. A data packet. They claim it contains a message for the Empire. Show me, Varath commanded. The holographic display shifted to show a document written in the Dominion's own language. It was titled simply, The Quiet Century. As the council read, silence fell over the chamber. The document told a story that none of them had expected. 100 years ago, the document explained, humanity had discovered faster than light travel. Within months, they had made contact with alien species for the first time. What they learned had horrified them. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. It was a battlefield where the strong conquered the weak. Empires rose and fell in endless cycles of war. Species were enslaved, exterminated, or forgotten. There was no law, no justice, no mercy. Only power. Humanity had looked at this galaxy and made a choice. They would not try to conquer others. They had no desire for empire. But they would also never allow themselves to be conquered. They would become so dangerous, so terrifying, that no species would ever dare to attack them. For 100 years, while the Dominion had been busy conquering star systems, humanity had been busy preparing. They had studied every weapon used by every major power in the galaxy. Then they had built better ones. They had analyzed the computer systems of every empire. Then they had designed programs capable of destroying those systems from within. They had observed the military tactics of every conquering fleet. Then they had developed strategies to defeat those tactics. They had hidden listening devices in communication networks across the galaxy. They had placed sleeper agents on dozens of worlds. They had mapped every major military installation, every supply route, every weakness in the defenses of every potential enemy, and they had built weapons. Weapons that existed only in theory for other species. Weapons capable of cracking planets. Weapons that could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. All of this had been done in secret. No one knew. No one suspected. The document ended with a single line: "We do not want war. But we are very, very good at it." Emperor Varth stared at the floating text for a long moment. His counselors waited in nervous silence, unsure how he would react. Finally, the Emperor spoke. "Lies. This is nothing but lies meant to frighten us. 100 years of preparation. Impossible. We would have noticed." "Perhaps," General Kovas said carefully, "we should send a smaller force first. Test their defenses. Learn more about their capabilities before committing our full strength." "No." Var's voice was cold and hard. "That is exactly what they want. They want us to hesitate. They want us to doubt ourselves. That is why they sent this document. It is a trick." He stood up from his seat, his artificial body humming with power. His eyes glowed with barely contained rage. "Assemble the Grand Armada," he commanded. "Every warship, every soldier, every weapon we have. I will lead them personally. We will crush these humans so completely that the galaxy will forget they ever existed." General Kovas bowed. "As you command, my Emperor. It will take 2 months to gather such a force. Then begin immediately. I want 10,000 ships ready for war." On Earth, Admiral Kang Suho received intelligence reports about the gathering armada. He was a quiet man, more scholar than soldier, who had spent his career studying alien military tactics. He had hoped his knowledge would never be needed for an actual war. That hope was gone now. He called a meeting of the Joint Defense Council. The council included the highest-ranking officers in the Terran Defense Force, each one responsible for a different aspect of humanity's military strength. General Bayuna commanded the ground forces. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and a reputation for brilliant tactical thinking. She had trained her soldiers to fight in any environment, against any enemy, under any conditions. "They are sending 10,000 ships," she said, looking at the intelligence reports. "We have less than 300. "Numbers are not everything," Admiral Suho replied. "We knew this day would come. We prepared for exactly this situation." Fleet Commander Park Do-won nodded slowly. "The question is whether we are willing to use what we have prepared. The Terminus platforms. We built them for emergencies. This qualifies." Silence fell over the council. Everyone knew what the Terminus platforms were. Everyone knew what they could do. They had been humanity's final insurance policy, built in secret over 8 decades. Hidden in the deepest corners of human space, they had hoped they would never need to use them. "If we use the platforms," General Yuna said quietly, "thousands will die. Possibly millions. Dominion soldiers have families too. They have children waiting for them at home." "I know," Do-hwan replied. "But if we do not use them, humanity dies. Our families, our children, everything we have built, everything we are." Admiral Suho looked around the table at his fellow officers. These were good people, he knew. People who valued life. People who hated the thought of causing so much death, but they were also protectors. Their duty was to keep humanity safe, no matter the cost. "We have no choice," Suho said finally. "Prepare the platforms. When the Dominion comes, we will be ready." The Grand Armada of the Galactic Dominion was the largest military force ever assembled in known history. 10,000 warships stretched across space in formations that took hours to cross. Carriers held millions of fighter craft. Troop transports carried armies capable of conquering entire planets. Supply ships brought enough weapons and ammunition to fight a war lasting decades. At the center of this massive fleet flew the Emperor's personal vessel, the Eternal Victory. It was a ship built not just for war but for majesty. Its hull was covered in gold and living crystal. Its weapons could destroy small moons. Its shields could withstand the fury of a star. Emperor Vorath stood on its bridge, looking out at his armada with pride. This was his legacy. This was the power he had built over 3 centuries of conquest. No species in the galaxy could stand against such force. "My Emperor," General Corvus said, "we are approaching the human boundary. Their defensive fleet has been detected. Show me." The main display zoomed in on the edge of human space. There, arranged in a thin line across the void, were the human defenders. 300 ships, exactly as intelligence had predicted. They were small compared to Dominion warships, simple in design, almost primitive in appearance. Vorath laughed. "This is their great defense. This tiny fleet? We outnumber them 30 to 1. They may have other surprises, my Emperor. Remember what happened to Commander Orith. Orith was a fool who underestimated his enemy. I am not Orith. I am the eternal Emperor of the Galactic Dominion. I do not underestimate. I overwhelm." He gave the command to advance. On the bridge of the battleship Unyielding, Admiral Han Jiwan watched the approaching armada. She was 53 years old, a veteran of 20 years in the Terran Defense Force, and she had never seen anything so terrifying in her life. 10,000 ships. The display showed them as an endless wall of red dots, filling the screen from edge to edge. Each dot represented a vessel carrying hundreds or thousands of enemy soldiers. Each dot carried enough weapons to destroy cities. And she had 300 ships to stop them. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer Shin Tai-Wu reported. He was young, only 28, but he had trained his entire adult life for this moment. His voice was steady despite the fear that must have been churning inside him. "Good," Jiwan said. She opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Han. You know why we are here. You know what we are fighting for. Every person on Earth, every colony, every child and grandparent and friend we have ever known. They are all depending on us today." She paused, looking at the approaching enemy on her screen. "We cannot win this battle with numbers. We cannot win with brute force. But we can win with skill. We can win with courage. And we can win by buying time." She did not explain what the time was for. Everyone in the fleet already knew about the terminus platforms. They knew their job was to hold the enemy in place until the platforms could be brought into position. "All ships," Jiwan commanded. "Engage." 300 human vessels leaped forward into battle against 10,000 enemies. The fighting that followed was brutal and fast. Human ships moved with incredible speed, weaving between enemy formations, striking and vanishing before the Dominion could respond. Their weapons were devastatingly precise, somehow bypassing Dominion shields to strike directly at vital systems. But numbers mattered. For every Dominion ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. Human vessels began to fall. The destroyer Braveheart was the first to go, torn apart by concentrated fire from a dozen enemy cruisers. The cruiser Morning Star followed minutes later, its reactor exploding in a brilliant flash of light. On the Unyielding, alarms were screaming. The ship had taken multiple hits. Fires burned in 3 sections. Life support was failing on the lower decks. Hull damage at 40%. Tai-Wu shouted over the noise. "Shields are failing. We cannot take much more." Jiwan gripped the arms of her command chair. Blood ran down her face from a cut above her eye. Around her, officers worked frantically at damaged consoles, trying to keep the ship fighting. "How much longer?" she asked. "The platforms need another 12 minutes. 12 minutes. In battle, that was an eternity. Half her fleet was already gone. The rest were fighting desperately, dying one by one. "Admiral!" Tai-Wu suddenly yelled, pointing at his screen. "They are here." Jiwan looked up at the main display. Behind the human colony worlds, space was opening. Not like normal hyperspace travel. This was something else. Something bigger. Massive structures were emerging from dimensions that normal ships could not reach. The terminus. Platforms. There were 12 of them, each one the size of a small moon. They had been built in hidden facilities over 80 years, constructed from materials that did not officially exist, powered by technologies that scientists still did not fully understand. They were humanity's final weapon, the last defense against extinction. On the lead platform, Director O. Seongan sat in the command center, surrounded by his crew. He was 71 years old. He had dedicated his entire life to building these machines. He had hoped he would die before they ever needed to be used. All platforms report ready, his second-in-command announced. Seongan looked at the battle raging in the distance. Human ships were dying. His own people were dying, fighting to buy him time. He could not waste their sacrifice. Activate primary weapons, he ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart was breaking. God forgive us. The terminus platforms fired. Beams of energy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen lanced out from the 12 platforms. They struck the Dominion Armada and simply erased what they touched. Ships did not explode. They did not burn. They simply ceased to exist, converted into pure energy that dispersed harmlessly into the void. The first volley destroyed 500 ships. The second volley destroyed 800 more. The Dominion fleet tried to respond. Thousands of weapons fired at the platforms. But the platforms had shields that absorbed everything, converting the enemy's own energy into more power for their weapons. On the eternal victory, Emperor Vorath watched in horror as his grand armada was destroyed before his eyes. Ships vanished around him. Entire battle groups disappeared in seconds. The most powerful military force ever assembled was being erased like chalk marks wiped from a board. Retreat, he screamed. All ships retreat. But there was no escape. The terminus platforms had surrounded the armada. Every direction led to death. Every attempt to flee was met with another devastating volley. In 17 minutes, it was over. 8,000 Dominion ships had been destroyed. The rest floated helplessly in space, their systems crippled, their crews awaiting capture or death. On the unyielding, Admiral Jiwan slumped back in her chair. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But looking at the wreckage that filled space around her, seeing the graves of thousands on both sides, she could not bring herself to celebrate. Victory had come. But the cost had been terrible. The Emperor's flagship floated dead in space. Its golden hull was dark. Its living crystal decorations had gone silent and cold. Emergency power kept the air breathable, but nothing else functioned. The most magnificent warship ever built by the Galactic Dominion had become a helpless metal tomb. Marine Sergeant Jang Hanna led her squad through the corridors of the Eternal Victory. They moved carefully, weapons ready, checking every corner and shadow. Somewhere on this ship, the Emperor was hiding. Their orders were to find him and take him alive. Hanna was 34 years old. She had joined the Marines at 19, trained for 6 years, and spent the last 9 waiting for a war she hoped would never come. 3 of her closest friends had died today, their ships destroyed in the battle. She could still see their faces when she closed her eyes. "Sergeant," one of her soldiers whispered, "I have a heat signature ahead. Main throne room. Move up. Stay alert." They reached the doors to the throne room. They were massive, 3 times the height of a human, made of solid gold, decorated with scenes of Dominion victories. Hanna planted explosive charges and stepped back. The doors blew inward. The throne room beyond was dark, except for emergency lighting. The living crystal pillars that had once glowed with the light of conquered stars were now dead gray columns. At the center of the room, Crouching behind his throne was Emperor Vorath the Eternal. He looked nothing like the mighty ruler who had commanded the largest military force in history. His artificial body was damaged, sparking and smoking. His eyes flickered with unstable power. He was shaking. "Stay back," he screamed when he saw the human soldiers. "Do you know who I am? I am the Emperor. I have ruled for 300 years. I have conquered 12,000 systems. You cannot do this to me." Hana walked toward him slowly, her weapon raised. Behind her, her squad spread out, covering the room. "Emperor Vorath," she said, "by the authority of the Terran Defense Force, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity and for the unprovoked invasion of human space." Vorath laughed, though the sound was more like a sob. "Arrest me? You are going to arrest me? I am a god. I am eternal." "You are a prisoner," Hana replied. "You will be taken back to Dominion space. You will tell your people what happened here. And then humanity will leave you alone, just as we always wanted to be left alone." She reached down and grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. He struggled weakly, but his damaged body had no strength left. The God Emperor of the Galactic Dominion was just a broken machine now. As she led him away, Hana paused at the door. She looked back at the throne room, at the dead pillars and the cold crystals and the empty symbols of a power that seemed invincible. "You should have listened to the warning," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away, dragging the Emperor behind her. The weeks that followed changed the galaxy forever. Emperor Vorath was returned to his capital in chains. The images were broadcast across every Dominion world. Their eternal ruler, their living god, weeping and begging as human soldiers handed him over to his own officials. The shame was absolute. The humiliation was complete. Within months, the Dominion began to fracture. Species that had been conquered and enslaved saw their chance for freedom. Rebellions erupted across dozens of star systems. Rival powers that had feared the Dominion for centuries now moved against it. The empire that had conquered 12,000 systems began collapsing under its own weight. Humanity watched from their borders. They did not help the rebellions. They did not attack the weakened Dominion. They simply waited, as they had always waited, ready to defend themselves but unwilling to conquer. Other species began to notice. The Keth Confederacy sent ambassadors first. They were followed by the Maroom Alliance, the Free Systems Coalition, and dozens of others. They came carefully, respectfully, with gifts and offers of friendship. They had seen what humanity could do when threatened. They had no desire to become the next enemy. Admiral Han Ji-won, recovered from her injuries and promoted to fleet commander, met with the Keth delegation. Their leader, an elderly diplomat named Varen, asked the question that everyone in the galaxy wanted answered. "How did you do it?" Varen asked. "You were alone. You had no allies. No one to help you. How did you prepare for something like this?" Ji-won considered her answer carefully. She thought about the decades of sacrifice, the secret facilities, the brilliant scientists who had worked their entire lives on weapons they hoped would never be used, the soldiers who had trained endlessly for a battle that might never come. "Because we knew what the galaxy was," she said finally. "We saw the Dominion conquering system after system. We saw species enslaved and exterminated. And we understood that no one would save us. If we wanted to survive, we would have to save ourselves." She looked out the window of her office at the stars beyond. "We did not want to become what we became. We did not want to build weapons capable of destroying entire fleets in minutes. But the galaxy gave us no choice. So we built them. We trained. We prepared. And when the enemy finally came for us, we were ready." Varen nodded slowly. "And now? What will humanity do now?" Ji-won turned back to face him. The same thing we have always done. We will protect our space. We will trade with those who wish to trade. We will help those who ask for help. But we will not conquer. We will not expand by force. We learned long ago that empires built on conquest always fall. She smiled slightly. We intend to last. 100 years passed. Terran space grew to 200 systems. Humanity traded with 17 species and had helped 3 civilizations escape extinction. They had built wonders, cities that floated in the clouds, stations that orbited around distant stars, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, but they never forgot the lessons of the past. On the border of human space, automated beacons still transmitted their warnings in every known language. The message had been updated over the years, but its core remained the same. You are welcome in peace. Enter with hostile intent, and you will not leave. This is not a promise. This is a fact. No one tested those words anymore. The memory of what had happened to the Dominion was still fresh in the galaxy's mind. The Terminus platform still existed, hidden somewhere in human space, ready to be activated if ever needed again. In a small apartment on Earth, retired Sergeant Jang Hannah tended to her garden. She was 94 years old now, her hair white, her hands wrinkled and spotted with age. But she still remembered that day on the Emperor's flagship. She still remembered the faces of her friends who had died in the battle. Her grandchildren visited often. Sometimes they asked about her medals, about the war, about what had happened so long ago. Hannah never told them the details. She never spoke of the fear, the violence, the terrible cost of victory. She simply smiled and said she had protected what mattered. The youngest grandchild, a girl of 7, once asked why she had become a soldier. Hannah looked at the child for a long moment. Then she pulled her close and pointed up at the stars visible through the window. Because out there, she said softly, there are those who want to take what we have. Our homes, our families, our freedom. Somebody has to stand between them and us. Somebody has to say, this far and no further. The child nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the importance of the words. Did you say it? She asked. Did you tell them? Hannah smiled and hugged her grandchild close. We told them, she whispered. And they listened. Outside, the sun was setting over a peaceful city on a peaceful world in a peaceful corner of the galaxy. Children played in the streets. Families gathered for dinner. Life went on as it had for generations. The galaxy remembered what humanity was capable of. The warnings still echoed across the stars. But on Earth, people could forget about the dangers beyond their borders. At least for a while, they could live in peace. They had earned it.